All right. So the key with finding professors for yourself is to identify people that have the same research interests with you, and as well as identify people that you can work with. And so those are going to be a little bit two different distinct things, right? So you might find people that have really cool research interests. And the problem is you actually go and try to communicate with them and they just have different working styles. And everybody has independent working styles of how they deal with things. And so sometimes you get these clashes with dealing with sort of finding the appropriate people to work with, right? So I have some tips here that I think are pretty useful for you if you're thinking about doing a PhD in any particular field. I just know business, so it's going to be a little bit more applicable to that, but it's applicable to any other field. It's not necessarily just limited to business. So the first thing that I would do is narrow down your research interests, right? So, and this is going to identify, the reason is you want to identify the people that you're going to find interesting, right? So, for example, the way that I would personally do this and start doing some reading first, and that's why it's good to do kind of like a research master's first before you jump into your PhD, because you get a little bit of a smattering of what you are interested in, or you can get a little bit more of guidance in terms of figuring out what you're interested in. So you can narrow down a little bit more. And the reason that the way that you do that is you just read broadly and find the things that you're interested in, right? So it's really trying to figure out what is true to you in right in there, so that you can sort of figure out what you're interested in, right? So if you like decision making, well, then there's a bunch of people around the world that are doing decision making, and then you have to sort of narrow down, okay, what about decision making that you find is interesting? Well, is it the fact that people make decisions on a regular basis and they make these little tiny micro decisions or small little decisions, or they're making these large decisions that have a huge impact on society? And then you want to sort of narrow down people that are doing those kind of things, or those sort of two different things. And they could be different, right, in terms of how people understand the world. Or you can narrow down on the context, and that's an important way to think about it. So, I'm interested in medical devices, obviously interested in technology and social media, social influence, all that kind of stuff. So, if there's people that find that interesting, well, then, that there is professors out there that are doing this kind of stuff. There's not a lot of people doing the YouTube thing. I think I've only heard of one other person that is kind of doing this, as business professors and stuff. But, in terms of, finding these people, you just kind of narrow down on the sort of contextual thing that you find interesting and jump on that, right? So whether it is, maybe you like lawn mowing, and that's a really good thing that you just love to do, and that's your sort of passion is lawn mowing. Well, then try to find the professors that are doing research on the lawn mowing industry. That's wherever it is. Or maybe you like knitting. Well, there's people that have done research on knitting, and depending, it all depends on which kind of angle you take at it. So you can just narrow down on what you're kind of interested in. And that's a quick way to jump into, people that are doing stuff that are in a like-minded sort of industry, or whatever it is that you find interesting, right? So just narrow down on both those two things, like the theoretical part, right? The decision making, for example, or whatever it is, sort of phenomenon that you're interested in, and then the context. And that's going to narrow down the group of people around the world that's doing that kind of stuff into a really tiny group. And you'd be surprised how quickly that narrows it down. And there'll be only a couple of people. Maybe it's 30 people. That would be a lot, but maybe it's a dozen people that are doing that kind of stuff. And then after that, you want to see what their track record is in terms of working with PhD students. So professors are just like people. We're not kind of, weird in any sort of way. Well, some of us are weird, including myself, really strange, very nutty. But anyways, you narrow down and you try to identify, if they can actually work with PhD students. Do they actually do this? And people sort of look at it and look at, they work in different sort of ways with PhD students. Some people just kind of refuse to do it. Some people like to work with PhD students. I kind of do. It's sort of developmental. It's a lot of work. But, it takes a lot of effort to actually get to the point where, things start happening for you. So some people just don't like to do that. Some people wait until they're postdoctorate students and then they work with them. There's all sorts of sort of ways to think about this, and you just want to see who they're working with, get an idea of, maybe you have this list of 10 different people that are doing good things, and you have this list, or the things that you find interesting, you have this list, and then you narrow down in terms of who are they currently working with, and now have they worked with somebody in the last 5 to 10 years, right? So this changes every so often. People just kind of lose interest. It does happen. Actually, it happens a lot, and people just lose interest in the thing that they're doing, and something else comes up and a priority comes up. So you just want to check to see if they're currently doing that, right? And that's an important thing. And then once you have kind of a short list of this, that's going to narrow it down into an even smaller group, right? So maybe it's 6 people, maybe less than that. And then you want to have a short list, and then just try to find people that you trust, professors that you trust that are in kind of the same field, and get some better information on them, right? So actually go out and ask around and get sort of insights on various professors or programs, and just get a feel for that, right? So you can, most folks are going to be pretty open to that. I'm probably a little bit more open than others in terms of opening up my office. But that most people are, you can find the people that are going to be nice, and they're going to give you some real information, and they're going to be helpful in terms of working with you in terms of that. So that's what I would do, is go and actually talk to some people and get their advice on that. Cold calling somebody is not going to work out as well. So you just want to get a feel and find somebody that you actually trust, maybe you interacted with a regular basis, and get their information from that, or get some sort of insight from them. And yeah, again, most people are going to be pretty nice if you just be humble, right? The other thing is keep your options open. So one thing is that you might think that this is the perfect person, and then you actually go and work with them, then it's not going to work out, right? So you want to make sure you have some options open in terms of going forward before you kind of narrow down too much and sort of take the leap on that. And the last thing I wanted to point out is you want to look for not just a professor, but you want to look for supportive programs that are going to be helpful, right? So the reason is you want a team available in case something crazy happens. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that professor is like mean, or you don't like them, or whatever it is, but there's something that could happen, right? That person that you're working with could die. That person that you're working with can have a heart attack. That person you're working with can go through a divorce and go through some, tough times for them, where they just can't dedicate time with you. And sort of this life stuff matters. And that's why you need to have a team. So find people that with a PhD program that has a couple of, just really nice human beings that are willing to work with you and keep going forward if something crazy was to happen. And there's, that narrows down the field even more in terms of the different programs that have that, right? So you want to look for that sort of ability, or look for that sort of flexibility where people are going to be working with you. Because if you go to the one place that has the one person, you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And sometimes you just don't know either, right? Until you actually jump into it. You're 2 years in and you realize that, yeah, maybe, this other thing is interesting to me. I want to go in that direction. I should go in that direction. That's what I would do, is sort of keep keep as much your options open, but still keep working forward with, a small group of people. And so you can see this is going to narrow it down. It's going to give you a lot of information in terms of not only people that are working in the same sort of area as you, or the things that you find interesting, but it's also going to identify people that you can probably work with. And then after, it's also going to help you out in case things don't work out in the way that you plan that it to work out, and often is the case. And so it gives you options to move forward in terms of making that decision going forward.